Hello, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all my friends, brothers, and sisters. It's always a pleasure to share insights with you, especially during these historic times. Today, we are witnessing some massive economic shifts, so monumental that I believe this is going to decide the next generation of finance, society, and personal wealth altogether. Great to see you guys. Edo, David, how are you doing?
Good, good. I'm enjoying it up here in the Great White North, Canada. And it's up here in Alberta and northern Alberta, Edmonton area. It is like drenched with snow, and we're going into like minus 30. Well, that's a big change from Texas, but kind of loving it.
You're behind the Great Wall,
Yeah.
Canada. Yeah. You know, I can't believe you went back there. I mean, I'm sure it's family, but
Yeah, it is
so
family. My
scared to
mom's
step
up
foot
here.
in
So what
Canada.
can you do?
Edo, you're doing all right? Good?
I'm doing great. I am back to Europe. Happily in Greece is actually warm now, so I did spend a couple of weeks in Dubai. I was just loving it, but I do love Greece as well, so I'm not sad to be back at home.
It's
No
always nice to
problem.
be home.
Yeah.
Okay.
It feels
Well,
very good when you enter the airplane and you are actually going back to your home country, and it feels good like when you love to live in this country, so it's just a great feeling.
hmm.
And
All
by
right.
the way, my coffee that I mentioned just arrived, so I'm going to be back in 30 seconds.
That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and set the stage for this conversation today. So, as I said, we're at a turning point. David, what I really think is approaching here, and I know this sounds crazy, but you got to be mindful as we're approaching a new financial system. Obviously, you're going to have continuous debasement of currency. So, I really believe that a hyperflationary reset is what's going to unfold here gradually because, fiat currencies are worldwide being debased at the whims of central bank policies. And, this is not speculation, it's reality. Every major financial analyst and economist out there are now starting to acknowledge that something more radical is underway. And I want to make another bold statement, and I've repeatedly said this over many years now. The evidence is growing and the indication clear day by day that in some way, form, or fashion, we are going to be returning to a gold standard. But I don't think it's the kind of gold standard that our grandparents had, right? This is
Right.
something a little more modern. The iteration is going to be backed by digital blockchain infrastructure, which is going to create this new settlement layer that's going to be more efficient and transparent than anything we've ever seen. But I do believe we are going back to a gold standard. So before we get into the weeds of all that, Edo, you do have a very powerful title here. Trump just confirmed XRP adoption. And I know you're trying to say read between the lines, right? So maybe you could go ahead and break that down real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I want to share a video. And before people tell me that, well, he didn't effectively mention XRP, you need to read between his words because what he described on that video is straight out of a Ripple playbook. So I'm going to bring that to the screen. I do need 1 second here. Okay. Can you guys see the screen? Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure the volume's up.
Yeah. I'm going to put it on the maximum and I'm going to hit play.
Many Americans are unaware that behind the scenes, the technical backbone of the financial system is decades out of date, many, many years out of date. You know that Paul and others are straightening it out, but payments and money transfers are costly and take days or even weeks to clear. Under this bill, the entire ancient system will be eligible for a 21st century upgrade using the state-of-the-art crypto technology. Who would have thought we would have been saying that 2 years after? Many Americans are unaware that behind the scenes, the technical backbone of the financial system is decades out of date, many, many years out of date. You know that Paul and others are straightening it out, but payments and money transfers are costly and take days or even weeks to clear. Under this bill, the entire ancient system will be eligible for a 21st century upgrade using the state-of-the-art crypto.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did see that actually. Yep.
Yeah. I had posted it on one of my videos as well earlier last week, but yeah, crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of minutia in there, but it's so clear the way he was just kind of like talking about it. He's talking about the RippleNet infrastructure. Definitely. He's
100%.
Yeah. And the other thing is, he's a talking head, really, in my opinion. I mean, just the way he was looking at the paper and just saying it, but Yeah, I think this is all coming into fruition. So go ahead and break it down. I'll let you guys discuss it real quick, and I'll put my 2 cents in shortly.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what's the only digital asset fully regulated in the United States, right? It's XRP. And more people will say, what if he's talking about BTC? Well, I don't think so, because whenever we're talking about removing friction, if you utilize BTC, you would actually be adding more friction to the equation. So XRP is everything that he just described. And I truly believe it's no coincidence that a couple of months ago, Brad Garlinghouse and Stuart Alderoty were both for dinner with the presidents. It was not Ethereum founder invited in the White House either. So when you take the high transaction fees of BTC, lack of scalability, and then you have extremely high gas fees with Ethereum, and then you have a network that is American-based, let's be honest, Solana, but they halt down every week with transactions that are not being processed as with the same efficiency as the XRP ledger. And then you just eliminate choices, right? What we are left with, well, there is one digital asset that's fully regulated in the United States. There is one blockchain that is truly battle tested, that has been actually praised by financial institutions, personalities like Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank and former IMF. And then we draw all the connections that Ripple has with the IMF, with the Bank of International Settlements, with central banks around the globe. The conclusion is pretty obvious. Who do you think Donald Trump is talking about? Well, at this point, it remains clear that he's talking about RippleNet. He's talking about the XRP ledger capabilities. And it's exactly what Versan said. You need to read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think now that particular video is a little bit older. I had posted it even as a reminder on one of my videos last week, but the narrative has not changed. And that's the emphasis. The emphasis of bringing that up is not, well, if it was made last week, it could have been made yesterday. Who cares? The narrative is the same. And this is the agenda that they are pushing forward. And one thing that Versan talked about, where he said, hey, look, I think what we're going to see is a very hyperinflationary environment for fiat. And when you're changing from one, system into another, the greatest level of volatility is at the end of something and the beginning of something else. That is where the most chaos kind of takes place. And you can literally watch this happen right now in real time. I mean, you got global instability, with all of these, wars that are going on. You got market instability. I mean, you're watching some markets just absolutely fly, like the Russell a couple weeks back was at a new all-time high. You watch gold and silver come on over the last 50 plus years, even though it's retraced from where it hit up there, it's still significant to see silver at that price. This space, of course, is facing a lot of interesting things. One of the interesting things was this: Bitcoin has lost over 133 million in outflows. And I think that Ethereum was close behind that with about 83 million in outflows in the last week. XRP saw 38 million of inflows, which is kind of telling. And, you're hearing all these narratives out there. One thing that we were talking about off screen is how Michael Saylor, of course, MicroStrategy being, big time Bitcoin, holder. And as we know, Ripple gets a lot of flack for holding a bunch of XRP in escrow, right? Well, Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy holds 760 some thousand Bitcoin. I mean, there's only about 17 or 18 million Bitcoin that are probably going to be in circulation. About 3 to 4 million of them have been lost. So from a percentage point of view, this one company holds over 5 to 8% of all Bitcoin that's out there. And then there are other ones that hold, a good percentage as well, 1 million here, 1 million there. So, this and the narrative that MicroStrategy was saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to hit, like you had mentioned, Edo off stream, $1 million. But now they're prepared to ride it to 8,000. Come on, you can't make this stuff up. It is truly insane. But that's what's going on. If you really know what you hold in XRP and you truly understand its value proposition in the global economy, and this is information that is backed up by the Bank of International Settlements, of course, the International Monetary Fund, all these other major economic organizations that are really pushing this engine forward to the new digital economy. And hey, whether what we like or not, the WEF, and you got Ripple executives sitting on the board of that. All of this is moving forward, and it's something that is happening right before our very eyes, but most people are completely oblivious to it. And inside this digital asset space, it truly mesmerizes me of the this whole team sport thing. Like, you know, oh, you got the XRP army, you got the Bitcoin Max, he's got Cardano Samurais and Chainlink Marines and all that. It is insanity. If we really want to see situation in the Clarity Act that's coming, which is what we're talking about, that is going to be a big plus for us, then why, oh, why do they have us divide it so much? It's unite you stand and divide it you fall. That is all that's in my mind. Anyway.
No, you make some very solid points there. And I mean, for anybody paying attention very closely to these current events that are happening, it's become crystal clear that trust has intentionally been eroded. Trust in the financial system, the political system, even the mainstream media is collapsing. That's, I think, already done. And you know, journalism now is independent. You got people putting out this information from platforms like X, Instagram. In fact, more people get their news from X today than anywhere else. But I think also, without getting into too much detail there, we have to be mindful that also I think mainstream journalism itself has infiltrated X to a degree. Won't go too much down there, but just it keeps confirming that we're at this inflection point. And if you look at the soft disclosure, the cover-ups, the leaks over the past few years, you guys know what I'm talking about. You start to see the blueprint for a system reset. So it's not theory, it's deliberate, everything that's going on. And I think it's kind of a revelation to part of a plan to reset the financial system, right? And I think the bigger story here, though, which is why I started with gold, is the fact that gold is really once again becoming central to the stability. I think it's the only asset at this moment that's keeping us from going into World War III, really, because it's agnostic. It's unbound by the central authorities, you know, trusted across borders. It's just, you need some digital counterpart now for all of this, right? And I think that's where this new infrastructure is quietly being built. So I don't really care about the Bitcoin. I understand why Bitcoin moves up and down. It's just the Bitcoin, in my opinion, is really a speculative asset. And then you have settlement infrastructure, and understanding that key difference. That's the distinction there that people don't have. So I totally agree with you guys. Yeah.
I think one thing you touched on is these Epstein files. I mean, come on. Even from a moral point of view, if you were if you were an investor and you were investing according to your own personal values, I would never be holding Bitcoin. I'm sorry. The revelations that are coming out are too ridiculous, and the evidence behind it, it is insane. And there was a coordinated effort, to attack the XRP Ripple infrastructure way back in 2014. So we can see what's going on behind the scenes, and these folks that were utilizing these platforms and in their infancy, really, it's amazing. It's amazing. I won't hold it. I won't even hold it. I did hold some Bitcoin, but I've just gotten rid of it. I don't hold it anymore just because of that very fact.
Edo, if it's all right, I want to make another statement on Bitcoin, just to remind people that the Bitcoin movements, they're simply tied to liquidity cycles. So every time there's expansion in the cycle, it drives speculation inflows, right? But whenever there's a contraction and money is pulled out of the system, you see that same money that is pulled out from the spectators, and it's simply rotated into real assets. We've seen proof of this. I mean, look at Tether. Tether was really behind the synthetic issuance of stablecoins, which kind of gave Bitcoin a higher inflationary mechanism. So Bitcoin was climbing simply because Tether was issuing all these stablecoins synthetically, and they were using the Bitcoin profits to go buy gold, and now they have Tether gold. So I think a lot of the money that spectators had in there simply just keeps vanishing, and it just keeps getting reallocated into technology. And I think a lot of the money that went into Bitcoin is now financing Ripple's infrastructure. It's very possible. I'm just throwing that out there. It's just the core issue with Bitcoin is that most investors, they actually fail to do proper due diligence. Instead, what they do is they follow the headlines, they follow the hype, very bold claims that are really the ones dominating perception. Okay. And finally, what I'll say is that like when it comes to Bitcoin, they always treated leverage as their strength, right? But in fact, the leverage that the Bitcoiners use that they claim is their strength is actually what makes them such an easy target, you know? So I've seen a lot of Bitcoiners get liquidated, and that's a whole different subject. But I think it's become clear whether Bitcoin was involved in the whole Epstein thing, but there are real revelations that show that Bitcoin was definitely a DARPA technology, part of a larger intelligence operation. I'm talking about the Five Eyes. So, you know, Mossad, CIA, et cetera, and it's incredible. I think this is the early stages of basically all the money that's in Bitcoin may be flowing out and going into compliance. So who knows how this is going to play out, but it's going to be very interesting. It's just, I would leave Bitcoin alone and focus on the settlement infrastructure, because what's really changing in the world economy is the settlement infrastructure. So follow the money, as they say. Don't follow the headlines, follow the infrastructure.
And what's more interesting, you can't settle value using BTC. The high transaction fees basically prevent it from becoming a currency, which, by the way, for years, I had the white paper here in my wall. And when you look at it, it's actually 100% contrary to Satoshi's vision. So it's actually a failed experiment. Now they claim it's a store of value, but it's called a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. You can't use BTC as electronic cash, let's be honest here. So one by one, XRP fixes all of BTC malfunctions, but what our people are missing out is that the whole Epstein thing is more serious than it looks like. I mean, it's now undeniable public information that Epstein has funded early BTC development. They basically hijacked the network, they gained control over BTC. They managed to accumulate large sums of BTC because they got control of the mining industry back in 2011. Who do you think those dormant wallets are tied to? They are offloading those wallets on top of retail investors. Every time there is a public figure that goes out, remember you guys, in the turning point a couple of months ago, actually in the last year, when Donald Trump was at the BTC conference. Do you guys remember that? And we shared this in our videos here, and I was telling everyone, and Versan and David as well, we were saying that this is a great sign that there will be a correction, because they need exit liquidity. How do they harvest liquidity? Well, they need to push it to the masses. They need mainstream podcasts. Michael Saylor was basically everywhere. I think he was even in Joe Rogan's podcast. He was basically in every single mainstream podcast. This is all by design to harvest retail's liquidity. I don't know how people cannot realize that even the mainstream BTC influencers right now, they are all silent about the Epstein connections with BTC. They are not being transparent. I think the whole BTC narrative is falling apart. But in the other hand, releasing the files at this moment is also strategic. I don't think this is coincidence. This is 100% intentional and aligned with there will be a financial reset, but there will be also a crypto reset. And this is all tied to what Versan was saying. I totally believe BTC will, I don't think BTC is going to stay around. And this capital has to find a new home. BTC's liquidity is going to flow towards utility assets just like XRP, HBAR, SHX, and a few other digital assets that are going to survive regulation, that are battle-tested blockchains that have a great technology. But it's not only about technology, it's also about political alliance. Who is Ripple partnering with? Who are BTC partners, for to say, right? So there will be a division, there will be a separation, and we can't have a crypto market that's tied to utility that still follow BTC movements. It doesn't make any sense. How you can be settling value on the XRP network and suddenly have a 10% correction because some dormant wallets sold BTC. That doesn't make any sense. You perpetually going to have this systemic threats to BTC because of wallets that got control of the early network, whether it's directly Epstein or his friends, right? We don't know exactly who is behind those wallets. I would argue there is a high connection from those dormant wallets with Satoshi's wallets, okay? Everyone's looking to Satoshi's wallets or here, which is about 1 million BTC that has never been touched. But on the surface, there are millions of BTC that are being moved on a daily basis. that are being offloaded on centralized exchanges that enforce KYC. So if you send 80,000 BTC to Coinbase, that means Coinbase knows who is sending those BTC. Even if you do the types of OTC deals, there is some sorts of KYC, right? So they know who is behind BTC. The whole Satoshi Nakamoto fallacy, the dream is over. I have to break down as it is. We have been ahead of the curve here on the turning points. And honestly, I think adoption is more close than most people can realize.
You gave me goosebumps. Yes.
Yeah.
You're spot on, Edo. Incredible analysis. Thank you. David, your thoughts?
Well, right now, like one of the things I'd like to pick up on is we're seeing some of these dormant Satoshi wallets actually getting activity. All of a sudden they're waking up. What's going on behind the scenes? And especially when we get this big time information dump, I think we're about ready to see all the players that were behind BTC and this creation are going to be completely exposed. I think that BTC is going to absolutely collapse. I really do. And that could, it could spell like a devastation for this digital asset space. That's true. But this is where you get the phoenix rising right out of the ashes, because the utility that is going to pour in and these legitimate assets that have been there to solve problems. Bitcoins have been a smokescreen from day one. The one big point you pointed out is that whenever you would watch Tether minting go up, well, the price of Bitcoin would go up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they printed money out of nothing, basically, went out and bought Bitcoin, then turned around and, like you said, bought real world assets with that. So it seems like there's got to be some major players behind that. Nobody could get away with doing that and be anonymous in doing it for all this time. Do you think that for 5 seconds, that if you as an I created a monetary instrument, a store of value, unit of account, medium of exchange, and the powers that be, like the fiat, the central banks, the Federal Reserve, that they would just sit back and say, yeah, we just don't know who, and we can't really find out who made it, but you're talking about something that has a greater value than the fiat system itself. They know exactly who's behind this. And I do believe that, yes, and we'll find out that there's been some major government agencies behind the movement of this whole deal, because hey, when SHA-256 and Bitcoin was made, that was top secret, encryption. That's what it was. And yet, it's become out there in the public open source. Not a chance. No,
I agree. Well, that's why I brought this back up again, because it is important. See, look at the headline of this, right? The headline is saying, promising to make the US the world's crypto capital. First of all, I think the new technology is going to be agnostic. It's going to not just be the US, it's going to be the rest of the world too. Now, I do want to make another statement on Bitcoin. The reason I'm going to make this statement on Bitcoin is because I'm going to try to make a short out of this as well for the audience, all right? But the truth is, when it comes to Bitcoin, you have to understand that the narrative has been tarnished for so many years. Now, from a technical standpoint, what was the original thesis, the goal? It was to create a payments infrastructure. Yet for the last decade, we've seen the focus be pushed then to a store of value, which frankly makes no sense. And I'll tell you why. Currency is meant to circulate. It's not supposed to be stagnant. So frankly, that makes no sense. If a currency is meant to circulate, then it can't be treated as a store of value, right? Then if it's store of value, then it fails as money. So bang, that's out the window. So the store of value narrative then is also a crutch. I'll tell you why. For many different reasons. First of all, look at the historical narrative. Bitcoin, again, has shifted stories multiple times over 15 years. From DARPA-backed technology to a libertarian dream, and now to a speculative asset for institutions. Now, each of these shifts as far as the narrative should have been red flags for anyone who's seriously invested in this. And today we have a lot more modern confirmations. Okay. Even my guest, a good friend of mine, actually, Martin Armstrong, he was on this podcast, and he suggested the origins were deeply intertwined with intelligence agencies, right? Then you have the price movements, how they're cyclical with the synthetic issuance of stablecoins, Tether. So the whole narrative of Bitcoin is indeed falling apart. And where we are today is we're on this brink of digitization. The whole world is entering this digital format. So, we're going to see all value go on chain eventually. And that's why when we talked about this, Edo and I, a few weeks ago, we explained how we're at the early stages of utility regulation, global adoption, where I think financial institutions are actively preparing to move every form of value onto the digital rails. So just to reiterate some of the things we've spoken about before, we're talking about all the money in the world, whether it be tokenized or something real, tangible of value. You're going to have all of this value be consolidated onto the blockchain infrastructure. Okay, this is why we always talk about Ripple. This is why we always talk about XRP. Now, off record, we actually do on our consulting sessions. We talk about a variety of complementary technologies in detail that pose a real investment opportunity. But the reason we talk about Ripple and XRP is simply because it is at the core of all of this infrastructure. You're going to see the one who consolidates settlement is basically the largest player in the ecosystem. And I think that is XRP. Now, XRP does have a complementary relationship with the Stellar Network, XLM, too. So that kind of falls into the two-tier banking system touted by the BIS. Anyways, so, I mean, there's just so much evidence out there that Bitcoin is not what it seems. And if you're serious about investing in this infrastructure, you need to focus on exactly that, the infrastructure. Forget the headlines, forget the noise. All right. So final thing I'll say is I have seen so much BS news in the last few weeks as Bitcoin was tanking, saying that China's buying Bitcoin, BlackRock started buying Bitcoin. They're making a Bitcoin reserve. And it's insane because none of it is true at all. Okay. And the final thing I'll say on Bitcoin is a few years ago, Vendel and I, we actually tried to reach some of these Bitcoin individuals, these maxis. Okay. We tried to reach out to Mark Moss. I think I shared the story with you. You guys remember? So we tried to reach out to Mark Moss. We tried to reach out to Natalie Brunel. You guys might know who she is. And what's her name? Lael Hemper? I forgot her name. Big Bitcoin maxi. And I'm not kidding. These people were very rude. They were very dismissive. They did not want to get on a podcast and have a normal conversation. We weren't going to insult them. We weren't going to attack them. We made it very clear off record. It's just they refused to come and talk to us about this because they're heavily incentivized to push it. And I promise you,
sorry to interrupt you, but Mark Moss, while he was trashing XRP on Twitter, we found out, and also Vandel shared this, that he's an angel investor for Ripple. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I remember that. So yeah, there's just a lot of distraction. Look here, don't look over there. And again, it's like important to follow not what they're saying, but what's actually being done. And this is exactly why I keep talking about gold entering the equation, right? In my opinion, the gold narrative is the most underreported critical component of where this is all going. I am telling you now, we are going to have a gold standard again, okay? The central bankers know this. That's why they're front running people on this, okay? And by the way, silver is being remonetized again. That's like the breaking news. So there's so much to go into, but in some way, form, or fashion, you're going to have this digital counterpart to having real assets backing the new financial system. And there is this race for resources. The whole world is fighting for resources. And you can sugarcoat it any way you want, but that's the truth. That's why you need gold, you need silver, and you need settlement infrastructure. That's how you beat the banks at their own game as they continuously impoverish the nation.
No, I think one thing for sure, when it comes to, a gold-backed system, the reason why this is going to be so necessary is because when they let the whole thing absolutely crash, totally collapse into something absolutely catastrophic, I believe is coming. People are going to beg for a new system, but they're going to need something that they can trust. Well, gold, silver, precious metals, those assets that you can hold in your physical hand have been, people have had confidence in those things for the last 5,000 years, and they're absolutely agnostic. So this is where I do believe you will have a new system that is a digital distributed ledger technology based system, but the fundamental value of it will be backed by some sort of a commodity based system. It may be a basket of commodities. Gold definitely has been designated a tier one asset by the BIS. I think XRP is going to get designated as a tier one asset of the BIS. You will probably see some sort of marriage between the distributed ledger technologies that are going to be utilized to facilitate the infrastructure in the new system being backed by real world assets, because trust is going to be absolutely required and people are going to beg for a new system. But they have been in the background developing this new system the whole time with the expectation of this current one dying. And I mean, we have been reading, you guys, us three for sure, and a few others. We have been investigating this now for years and years and years. And the information, I mean, we could stack up evidence after evidence till you have, literally from the floor to the ceiling worth of evidence, that this is where we're going. You have central banks around the wide world, of course, developing some measure of CBDC, and in the United States, private-public partnership with stablecoins. That's what the Genius Act is all about. And they're putting in tens of billions into that. Now, you don't have to be too sharp to think, do you think that they're putting in all that dough without ever having the expectation of employing it? Come on, they do. So they got this. And like I love saying this because it's so true. The ones who have set the fire are going to be the ones that show up with the hose.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have to talk people into it. They're going to beg for it. But absolutely right. Central banks, they're literally banking against, and pardon the pun, against their own system. They are buying gold like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they do that if the currencies that are not backed by gold have such confidence? Come on. Do you remember that video that came out of the FDIC sitting in that private meeting where they were laughing and joking that the average folks, if they knew what we knew, ha, 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 ha.
The whole system would implode, right?
Oh, the whole system would implode. And so this is what's really going to go down. And I think it's going to happen a whole lot faster than what a lot of people think. I think once you see the Clarity Act, literally everything, all the I's dotted, T's crossed, that thing signed and brought into fruition, because they've got the roads, they've got the rails, they got everything they need. All they need is the regulatory, framework. They get that. I think they're going to start pulling strings and flipping switches, and the whole thing's going to collapse right before our very eyes, the current system, and they're going to introduce the new one. Remember, this all comes down for these central bankers. It's control. They would have never had it so good. They can program their monetary policy right into the very currency that they're issuing. That is true, and have power over it. It's truly phenomenal. And this is what I find the most amazing. This is probably the greatest financial shift since the invention of coin, yet 90+% of people that it will affect are oblivious to it.
I mean, people in this building don't even pay attention. And I've given free seminars right here in the other office. I've offered free seminars. People don't show up. I tried bringing booze once, like alcohol. Maybe people would show up, and they did, but they didn't stay long. I'm not even kidding. But real quick, I do want to say this. I think this is where kind of like eventually XRP and the digital financial ecosystem actually decouples from all of these cycles, right? And that ties us into this debasement of hyperinflationary reset. Okay. When this does happen, I think money is going to flow into where it truly belongs. Some narratives we see in the news, I think today, like with the Epstein, the breaking down of the trust, these are catalysts to justify all these flows that we're talking about. But, make no mistake, I do believe that the consolidation of all value is going to shift to this blockchain settlements. It's inevitable. And our job here at the Black Swan and Digital Outlook and what Edo's doing, it's simple. It's just simply to anticipate the moves before they become breaking news. And we've done pretty good damn job at this, and position ourselves where basically we are in control where liquidity and financial sovereignty actually reside in the digital future. And sadly, the window of opportunity is closing pretty damn fast.
Very
But
fast.
by having exposure to some of these assets, if you understand by design how they function, I mean, understand the technology. Like I said earlier, when all assets go on chain, you essentially, in some way, form, or fashion, not the traditional sense, you do become your own bank. You do become the lender and buyer of last resort, like a central bank. And I think this is the ultimate form of financial sovereignty. But you have to be mindful until we get there, you're going to have these price swings as long as they're coupled to Bitcoin and the debt market and the expansions and contractions that mirror M2 money supply, which is how much money is injected into the system, and then your
Yeah.
liquidity cycles. So that
And
is
then-
eventually going to break. And yeah, final thing I'll say on this is that I think where we are in the cycle, in the grand cycle, compared to what Ray Dalio said the other day, it's true, the world order is breaking down, but I do believe we're going to have one more cycle of QE. And this is that final blow off top before we have a real correction or a crash like scenario. And then we see the Phoenix rise. So there's going to be another wave of M2 and QE. You're going to have a bull market is what I'm trying to say eventually.
No, I think you're right. I think the thing with this new system, this new economy, we are seeing a new economy, but the infrastructure sees there and the distributed ledger technology is going to be utilized. It is not, I think one of the factors is, yes, the first thing that it has got to be able to settle is the value and, monetary control and all that kind of stuff. But remember, it's not only going to be about that. You're going to be talking about all your information's going on chain. You will be tokenized. They will tokenize absolutely everything is going on chain. It's all going to be tokenized, all information, your medical history, your educational history, your background, everything that you can imagine will be available on chain. And this is where I think from a societal point of view, a lot of us are having a hard time even digesting what the world will really look like under that kind of situation. And now, of course, this is where, a lot is built on the fear aspect of it. But this is just a major leap. And of course, these powers that be, BIS and WEF and IMF, they're calling it the fourth industrial revolution. Now, you just look back at these previous industrial revolutions, which did transform the way the world worked, right? I mean, when you went from, dealing with, just hand labor into coal and steam, that changed manufacturing in a big, big way. Then you had what happened with World War I, World War II. And then after that, you saw an explosion of technological change. Of course, the third one, which was the iteration of the internet, and how that, look right now, what we're doing, when I was growing up until my 20s was sheer and utter science fiction. That's what it was. And here we are. Well, in order for the wide world to evolve into this new change, think of the invention and the application and the innovation that is going to come. The people that are willing to kind of get on board now and to be able to invest in the protocols of these assets today, it would like be investing in HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, if you could, at the burgeoning days of the internet. That would have revolutionized your life and your family's life, probably for generations. This shift is going to, like I always say, it's probably going to represent the greatest wealth transfer, in the history of mankind, what the world has ever seen. But it's going to permanently seal a change. There's going to be a societal change. There's going to be those that have, and the rest are going to be in a system that, and in my way of thinking, that is not, this universal basic income, and on and on and on it goes. I mean, you have to really start looking at the broader picture. I know we're focused on the investment, and we get that, but it's going to be so much more superseding than just that. And that's where I think a lot of people are just, they'll adopt it. They'll have to, because that's what they're going to be using for their life. Almost everyone, even 5-year-olds, have one of these. It's that impactful. And that's what I think is going to happen. But I think it's going to happen way faster. These came out in 2007, the smartphones? Okay. 20 plus years, almost 20 years later, it's had such an impact globally and transcends borders. I think this is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be so quick, and it's going to be mind-boggling. And we're doing the best we can, like you said, Versan, getting that word out, sharing what we know, what we've learned, all that kind of stuff. And but I really do believe that folks out here, if you're not out there really researching it for yourself, you can't build confidence on somebody else's conviction. You just can't. You got to do the research yourself as well. And
Totally agree, David.
Yeah.
And we try to not keep this about hype. We like to always give both scenarios here, because this will be a massive transformation in the financial system. It might be a painful transformation to a lot of people, unfortunately. And there is one scenario that I want to discuss with both of you, Versan and David, which I think I never brought it up to the turning points, but I was having these thoughts a couple of weeks ago. I even recorded a video, which is about, there is maybe one way that they will try to get rid of people holding XRP, and I want everyone to pay attention to this, is about if the introduction of wholesale CBDC happens before retail CBDC. So basically, retail CBDC is for day-to-day usage, basically peer-to-peer transactions, and wholesale CBDC is at a financial level enterprise. So let's say if they roll out wholesale CBDC before retail CBDC, what happens to the price of digital assets? Well, inevitably, they have to adjust upwards. So XRP, XLM, HBAR, all of the tokens tied to financial enterprise use case are going to likely have price appreciation. Now, the real problem here is that I see a lot of people are going to be taking profits and selling their XRP. What they're going to be trading this XRP for? Very unlikely they're going to be selling XRP to buy gold. The majority of them are going to believe they are millionaires on paper, exactly on paper, and they're going to be trading this XRP for obsolete fiat currencies. And here comes the big danger. If they roll out retail CBDC, and now you are a millionaire in paper, you might be forced into a new system where money is programmable. So here's a big hidden danger, and one of the reasons why I believe you have to be very careful when taking profits with your XRP in this specific scenario where a wholesale CBDC implementation happens before the introduction of retail CBDC. And I think it all will start with the Genius Act, because what they are doing right now, they want to bring yields for stablecoins. So I think this is the bait, because they want people to actually get used to using stablecoins. Because what a lot of people in the crypto world do right now with stablecoins, they use stablecoins just as a form of parking their money, right? So what's the benefit of holding a stablecoin? Well, you get to buy BTC, you get to buy XRP, whatever digital asset you actually buy. But whenever they start to introducing yields out of stablecoins, people are going to start to park their capital in stablecoins. So I think this is the first bait to get the world's population actually use it for digital payments. And the problem is, once you park your liquidity in stablecoins, so imagine you are now a multi-millionaire because the equivalent of XRP you hold, let's say, is $3 million, and you sell, let's say, 70% of your holdings, and you're now holding, let's say, $2 million, but parking it in a stable coin. This is a form of programmable money. Just like you got rich overnight, you can also lose it overnight because you are not being, you are not having true ownership of your fund. So the whole Genius Acts thing is actually making it very easy for stablecoin sponsors to issue stablecoins. And the big problem with that is that this is a trust-based system. Most of stablecoin issuers are 100% unregulated. Look at Tether, for instance. They have been caught lying about their USD reserves. They have received a major fine. Of course, they got away with that. It's intentional. But there will be a major stablecoin issuer that's going to likely fall. And I think that will trigger a massive economic catastrophic event that most people are not prepared. That's likely going to transcend the crypto space. So it's going to have real-world consequences for the US economy. And at that point, we can have a scenario where liquidity is frozen, we are transitioning towards a new system, and a lot of people are locked out of XRP because they decided to take profits in fiat currencies that are now subject to hyperinflation. What do you guys think of this scenario? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
I'll
ahead.
try to keep it short, David. Okay.
Yeah, no, go
First
ahead.
of all, I think you said so much that needs to be unpacked to give people a full picture of this. First of all, the stablecoin has so many different agendas that are simultaneously achieved. Number one is really to get more dollars on chain. Okay. Once it's on chain, now we're talking about the bigger picture about getting all the money in the world. So I do believe the Genius Act, and I reported this before, was a catalyst to get everything on chain, okay? To encourage more and more people to use digital trash. And that's something Gerald Celente said, from cash to digital trash, right? Now, the bigger picture is this. I've always told people you shouldn't sell your XRP. I treat XRP like I treat gold and silver. I put it aside, and I'm not kidding. I forget about it. I have XRP I've been sitting on for more than 6-7 years now. I haven't even looked at it. I don't watch price fluctuations because I simply don't care. I focus on the bigger picture. And I'm sorry to say this, but most people are not going to understand this until it's too late, because a lot of the people in the ecosystem, and you see this nonsense on X especially, okay, they're pushing people into chasing yield, speculation, leverage trading. When you start to look at XRP's design, it continues to evolve silently within the plumbing of global finance. And this is where it gets crazy. When the next liquidity crisis hits, which is tied to dollar liquidity plunging, my first article on X about, is there an alternative to the United States dollar? And I said, yes, XRP. Basically, the traditional settlement rails are going to freeze. They're going to freeze. And that's what Jim Rickards talks about in his book, The Road to Ruin. That's when the system will pivot. I don't know if it's overnight, but they're going to pivot to the digital pathways that they've been building for more than 15 years now. Okay. And I think longer than that. And the ones that are regulated and already exist. And I think XRP is going to be one of them. I've been saying that for a very long time. And that's when I believe leverage is going to be turned into utility, and utility will be turned into value. Okay. So that's why I've always told people not to sell the XRP, because you're not holding a token, you're holding a seat at the table of the new monetary system. So every XRP in your wallet is pretty much a seat reserved at tomorrow's money table. That's it. How this is going to unfold, very different story, but there is another article I put together about the biggest financial cover-up, and it really explains how hard they've tried to get people out of XRP and flush them out. And it's tied to this suppression. It was tied to the SEC lawsuit. It was tied to the exchanges. So everybody was involved. It's insane. And the people we've spoken to, a lot of them actually, they own XRP, but for some reason they'll never share it online. You know, I mean, Michael Howell, the other day we had him on. He's a global, he's the godfather of global liquidity. That's what they call him, right? So that's his main focus. Now he has investments in Ripple, and he said I shouldn't say more. Now, off record, Vindel and I, of course, had a very interesting discussion with him. And let me tell you, he's up to speed on everything we've been talking about. You know, even Lawrence Lepard, and he's a Bitcoin maxi. He understands Bitcoin, but his investments are otherwise too, right? So again, they're just sidelining the masses, man. And if you don't understand how to read between the lines, like you said earlier, then you're going to miss it. And like I said, most people are not going to figure out until it's too late. I promise you that much. Like, I believe they've succeeded at deceiving people, you know, like all over again. So we'll see how it unfolds. I'm interested to hear what David's thoughts are.
Well, you know, we've had great conversations, Versan and I, you know, off camera and stuff like that on this very subject. But, you know, the fact of the matter with the Genius Act, the thing that really I find the most striking is, of course, that stablecoins tied to the US dollar have to be purchasers of US treasuries. So now they have a guaranteed purchaser of their debt. Now, remember, it's the debt market that's the beating heart of all these markets, right? And right now you're looking at all these different countries around the wide world trying to get out of the US dollar, not into it. And here they have, okay, if you want stable coins, you're going to buy, you know, have to hold treasury bills. Now, the thing too is, remember when people look at stable coins, and I get this question all the time, hey, David, if I do exit my position, should I get into the dollar or into a stable coin? I always ask, well, what's your game plan with it? Because the reality is they're called stable coins because they're tied to the fiat currency. So if the fiat currency fails, the stable coin fails. Simple as that. And this is the way that I think that they are going to literally kind of swap their debt, if you will, by duping people into this whole idea of like what Edo was saying, storing their, their fiat value in stable coins, which are just as precarious, if not more so. And remember, how does stable coins make money? Because they do, right? Stable coins make money by earning yield. They take what you put in there, put it in a stable coin, then they take your money, and what do? They go earn a yield on it. And then they pay you a fraction of what they earn, because they walk away with hundreds of millions, if not billions, in earnings, right, from that yield, and they pay out, maybe a small amount. Well, what difference is that from fractional reserve banking, right? Yeah. And with this whole yield-based system that they're arguing over, and it's the banks just don't want to share that pie with these money service businesses. I would not be a bit surprised if the compromise is, and it all might be a dog and pony show to bring this out, but that banks will start issuing you and I, depository accounts in stable coins where we earn a yield with the bank. So you'll get your yield from your stable coin, but it'll be the same folks that have been, doing all the fractional reserve banking. You put in $1, they loan out 100 for every dollar. And that's what it's probably going to be. I think that's what the compromise is going to be.
David, I have a question for you. So
go ahead.
I didn't live consciously the crisis in 2008 in America, right? But what happened to regulated money market funds? Didn't they bail out in 2008?
Yeah, they were gone, right? And then who actually was
regulated ones?
It was only one guy in Switzerland that worked for UBS that spent any time behind bars for that nonsense, and that really hurt Judy and I. I mean, we took everything we had at the time, because we're a blended family. We went through our divorce and all that. We took what we had, we put it into a house, right? So, and that was in 2007. 2008, 2009 rolled around, over $150,000 of equity gone just like that. These guys don't care. Do you think they really care? I mean, they don't. They just consolidate it. And look at who's been buying up. You got JP Morgan Chase, all these bank failures, they're right in there to gobble it up just like that. Yep. And so what they're doing, it's a consolidation of power. That's what it is. And this whole idea, and I understand, but a stable coin, the way in which they're going to employ it here, because of course they said no CBDC in America, right? Because they can't sell the narrative of it. It's a unit of account, store of value, medium of exchange. It is everything. It's just not issued by the central bank, but it's a private-public partnership. That's all it is. You're going to be involved in this new system, whether you like it or you don't like it. It is coming, and you cannot avoid it. So in that capacity, why don't you start thinking about, okay, how can it benefit me in the meantime?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said, look, I'll be in this until they try to put something in me or on me. Then I am out, But this is ultimately leading to that type of thing. But that's what I see.
I mean, I read some very scary articles before about spraying the shit in the air. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I remember I was doing so much research and due diligence when they did the pandemic, or whatever you want to call it. Anyways, my take from all of this is, of course, like, what can we do, right? First, we have to educate ourselves and our communities, and we're doing a pretty good job at this, I said. Second, I think we really do need to explore the potential of a parallel economy where basically we can have our privacy and financial anonymity to a degree, if it's even possible, right? Because the truth is, everything is out in the open now. And that's why I called this video, if you look at the thumbnail, Financial Awakening, right? Everything is out in the open. So what are we going to do about it? And I think this community is so far ahead of the curve. And it's not just us, it's a lot of the other content creators out there. But this is why I think it's so critical for personal and national financial sovereignty. You have to look at what's a tier one asset strategy, right? You have to prioritize physical metals to a degree, so that way you can ensure protection as we transition into a digital economy. Your point, David. Because if you look at the power structures, the powerhouses, the central banks, the financial institutions, what the hell are they doing? They are printing money out of thin air so they can buy up whatever's remaining of the physical assets. and it's getting harder and harder for more people to access or even control it, right? So time is of the essence. The window is closing. And finally, not to leave it on a bad note, but I mean, there's more troubling news in Europe. And I mean, look what Europe recently did. Edo, you're up to speed on this. They passed laws requiring citizens to declare their gold holdings and their silver holdings. Like, this is scary, right? This is, again, not about transparency. This is about control. It's about taxation. It's about the erosion of whatever's left of financial privacy. That's why Bill Gates made his speech the other day. I can't even believe this guy's still walking around, right? So they're positioning themselves really in a way to tax us on unrealized gains. Like, this is where things get really nefarious, right? As far as the digital economy. So I think they're going to do this to crypto, and that's why there's a war on cash. I think if we're going to have digital money, like Dr. Pippa said at the World Government Summit, she said, we need convertibility. You know, we need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. And she has a very valid point there. This is something that it's going to fall onto the people to fight for, because, you know, our silence is consent. And that's why I think we all have a voice and we all have an obligation to say what we want and say what we feel, because united, you know, we can probably do something about this, but divided, as they try to keep us, even in the crypto community, we're divided. Like, come on, man, wake up. So yeah, it's just, it's a very uncomfortable situation, but you know, I feel good as far as like how painful the journey has been, but that pain also is very rewarding in a way, because now we see things for what they really are, and that truth, that clarity is what matters most. I think that is the milestone that we needed to, you know, take some action. Who knows, right? But I have faith in humanity. I am an optimist. I know a lot of the news we put out and what we talk about, it's just the facts, but you know, it's not doom and gloom, guys. It's really about setting the stage for us to do something, help each other out, I guess, right? Those are my final thoughts. I'm optimistic, you know, but
Totally agree with you, Versan. And you are correct. The situation in Europe is just getting worse when it comes to taxation. The Netherlands is now introducing a 36% tax law that's going to affect cryptocurrencies. Hence why I have been taking my necessary steps to actually protect my capital. I'm not subjecting myself to this type of theft. I did move my tax residence abroad in Cyprus, which is a form of friendly jurisdiction. So I think right now is the time to protect your capital. And this is not a financial advice, but I would avoid holding any sort of stablecoins with substantial amounts in stablecoins. I would not park my capital there. I understand it's a necessary evil when you want to buy crypto, but use it for the purpose of getting digital assets. Don't park your money basically in stablecoins. I think you also have to be preparing yourself, because once XRP takes off, you want to be positioned in a friendly jurisdiction. Otherwise, you're going to give 40% for the governments. You held all of these years, and then once you finally make it, they want to tax you about 40%. I don't think that's fair. I truly believe everyone that is in Europe right now should be extremely cautious when it comes about the jurisdiction that you're going to choose to actually off-ramp your crypto assets. At some point, if you want to take profits or generate yield out of your XRP, you don't want to be actually in the Netherlands, for example. I am from Italy. My tax residence is far from Italy right now, which is also not doing great when it comes to taxation. So I think these are my final thoughts. We are reaching 59 minutes. I want to send a special thanks to the audience. David, your final thoughts. Also, please, everyone, drop your location in the comments. You give us some extra comments and boost the algorithm, so the live stream is going to get delivered for more people. Also, remember, drop a like and subscribe to our channels. And David, please share your final thoughts.
Yeah, my final thoughts. I'd like to pick up on what Bursan said. I mean, we all really want people to genuinely make it. I mean, we want you to be able to get as much education as you can. We're trying to help as many people as possible to understand this space. And it's very, let's be honest, you get into it and there's so much to actually learn and know, and it can be very difficult. But my greatest level of encouragement would be, you know, build on what we are talking about here. Go out there and really start digging. I mean, back when I was young, you had Encyclopedia Britannica and microfiche at the library. I mean, nowadays you've got like all these search engines, and of course you've got all this AI. You can go to Chat GBT, you got Grok, you got all these tools where you can literally start to dig. And I will tell you what, I really do believe that as you do go out there and do a lot of this research for yourself, and I know some of you are, that it is going to open up your understanding in ways that you have not really experienced before. Look, I spent 24 years as a federal officer there in Canada. And when I started down this road, I mean, there I was actually shocked myself to discover a lot of things. Sometimes we have just been conditioned to take things at face value alone. And that has been a detriment to our society in a lot of ways. And I think that we've lost even this ability to critically think. I mean, you can't even have debate anymore. Don't let that be your modus operandi. Don't let it be your MO. In fact, train yourself to question. And it's okay. Questions are great. I would say question us as much as anybody else. But go out there and, for goodness sakes, do yourself a favor and truly research it and get yourself prepared. I know that Versan, I think Edo, myself, we all offer, coaching programs, and that is to put tools in your hand so that you can employ them to become greater and better at what you're doing. People will pay thousands of dollars for someone to help them with their golf swing, if you can imagine.
It's true.
But, invest in yourself financially, invest in that education and get yourself prepared, because what's coming, when you sit back and you look back, these words are going to ring in your ears, and you don't have to dig too far, and you'll find out that, yep, you know what, this is happening. And I would just so much encourage you to do that, because we want you to make it. I know Versan and I, Edo, we've always said, look, we want to bring as many people across that finish line as we possibly can. And that's really the heart of a lot of what we're doing. And the day may come where we're not even able to do this anymore. That may happen.
I mean, beautifully said.
Well, you have the opportunity. That's what I say.
Sorry, beautifully said. One more thing I want to leave with the audience is just that, there's a lot of psychological influence that you see being released in the news. So we have to be mindful of that. All of this is layered. Basically, a narrative sits upon a narrative, right? Opinion is starting to be blended with fact. Emotion is intentionally injected with the information because the emotion overrides our logic, right? And I think this is really how the propaganda that we see happening today evolves without even announcing itself. The information doesn't need to be false. It just needs to be framed narrowly enough to alter the interpretation behind it. So if everyone's looking around and seeing a different version of the truth, people begin to turn on each other. All right. And that's why you see people arguing about politics, culture, medicine, identity, economics, et cetera, XRP, Bitcoin, right? But the pattern is quite observable. It's repeatable and it's very measurable. So remember, again, we have to look to each other for facts and truth, right? But be very cautious what you're listening to out there. And I think, if you are going to be searching for this stuff, I do encourage everybody to take a session on if you really don't understand it. And of course, I'll be able to help you and many of the other experts in this community. But please talk to somebody if you feel like you need to. Okay. Besides that, I'm telling you, all this content we've been covering for years, it's for free on the YouTube channel. You just have to have the patience to sit through it and listen to it all. And of course, do your own research. Anyways, I got to go. I love you guys. I love everyone here. All right. So
all right.
Please have a blessed week. And I think Edo and I are going to be doing 2 podcasts a week. So we're going to go ahead and figure that out. I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Bless you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to see you next Monday, I guess. Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I'll keep them posted. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye. All right. Bye.